Hi, my name is Peter Thomas, President of Resource Compliance. This short video will look at the requirements of IIAR Standard 9, Chapter 7. Before studying Chapter 7, let's consider the big picture. First of all, the title of Standard 9 is Standard for the Minimum System Safety Requirements for Existing Closed-Circuit Ammonia Refrigeration Systems. The 9 in Standard 9 is an indication that it's IIAR's 9th published ammonia refrigeration standard. Standard 9 contains 8 normative chapters and 6 appendices. In this video, we'll examine the normative content in Chapter 7 and explanatory material in Appendix A. Chapter 7 is by far the longest chapter in Standard 9 and contains the minimum system safety requirements that are applicable to all systems, regardless of when they were built. Chapter 7 has 4 sections, which address location of equipment, general system safety requirements, machinery room requirements, and general equipment safety requirements. In this video, we'll explore the requirements of Section 7.1 and 7.2. Section 7.1 addresses the permissible locations to install ammonia refrigeration equipment. Like Standard 2, Standard 9 expects that refrigeration machinery will be installed inside a machinery room. However, Standard 9 allows for several exceptions. First, equipment may be installed outdoors. Second, select equipment may be installed in other than machinery rooms. Examples of such equipment are evaporators, condensers, low probability pumps, valves, and any ammonia refrigeration system or portions thereof with a total connected compressor drive power not exceeding 100 horsepower. Section 7.2.1 prescribes the purity requirements for ammonia used in a refrigeration system. The purity specified in Standard 9 matches Standard 2 for new designs and must have an ammonia content of at least 99.5%. Contaminants must be limited as specified in the table on this screen. Section 7.2.2 addresses the minimum pressure ratings that are acceptable for existing systems. As the table illustrates, Standard 9 is more lenient than Standard 2 in allowing the low side design pressure to be 150 psi, as opposed to 250 psi in Standard 2. While it should go without saying, Section 7.2.3 requires that existing equipment be rated to operate within the full range of temperatures associated with the system rating and for the full range of ambient temperatures to which the equipment will be exposed. You can determine the maximum and minimum temperature ratings for a vessel by reviewing its data report. Section 7.2.4 requires that systems be configured with a means to remove air and other non-condensable gases from the refrigeration system. Typically, condensers are configured with purge valves on the condenser drain piping to facilitate purging of non-condensable gases, as shown in the picture on the left. Occasionally, however, you'll run across a system lacking these valves, as depicted in the image on the right. Section 7.2.5 addresses oil management and requires that provisions be made for removing oil from locations in piping and equipment where oil will accumulate. Specifically, it requires that compressors be configured with a means to sample oil for periodic analysis and that oil removal be accomplished by one of 3 approved means. The picture on the right shows a standard oil pot with a self-closing deadman valve, which complies with the requirements of Standard 9. Other approved means for oil removal include a rigid pipe oil return or transfer system or a valve and piping assembly at the draining point where oil is removed from the system. At minimum, a shutoff valve in series with a self-closing shutoff valve is required. Appendix A clarifies that oil draining valves and piping can be either permanently installed or temporary. Either is acceptable. Standard 9 requires that piping and equipment surfaces not intended for heat exchange be insulated, treated, or otherwise protected to mitigate condensation and excessive frost buildup. This section exempts valves and other equipment from requiring insulation where insulation would restrict access to the component. Also, pipes and fittings constructed of corrosion-resistant materials or protected with a corrosion-resistant treatment need not be insulated so long as they are routinely defrosted to limit ice accumulation. Section 7.2.7 requires that piping, tubing, and equipment be supported to prevent excessive vibration and movement. Section 7.2.8 addresses service provisions and requires that equipment be accessible for inspection, testing, maintenance, and emergency shutdown. Charging connections must be plugged or capped when not in use. If located outdoors, the connection must be locked or otherwise restricted to access by authorized personnel only. This section ends by laying out the requirements for pressure gauges on the high side of the system. They must display at least 120% of the design pressure, and this section also requires that equipment have isolation valves for service and a means for pump out. With regard to signage and labeling, Standard 9 closely matches Standard 2. Machinery rooms must be equipped with NFPA 704 placards, alarm signage, and restricted access signage. Equipment must be provided a label indicating the equipment ID number. Valves intended for emergency shutdown must be clearly and uniquely identified at the valve and on schematic drawings. And finally, all pipes must be labeled. Section 7.2.10 states that it is the duty of the person in charge of the premises to provide directions for emergency shutdown that are readily available. This information must include details and steps for shutting down the system in an emergency, name and telephone numbers for operating and maintenance staff, names and numbers of government agencies that must be notified of a release, quantity of ammonia in the system, and emergency facility contact information. Where used, equipment enclosures must be provided with protection from physical damage and equipped with panels or doors as needed to operate and maintain the equipment. Section 7.2 concludes by addressing some general safety requirements that are applicable to all equipment, regardless of age. For example, any equipment subject to physical damage must be guarded or barricaded, and equipment with moving parts must be protected by screens or guards in accordance with OSHA rotating machinery regulations. I trust you found this training on sections 7.1 and 7.2 of IIAR Standard 9 helpful. I welcome any questions or comments that you might have. Feel free to reach out to me using the contact info on the screen. Thank you.